How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name's Josh Hutchinson, and I've got my trusty co-host John Binkle with me here today. How you doing, John?
I'm good, buddy. I'm glad to be here with you.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here too. So before we get started, thank you to all those who have submitted 5-star ratings on Spotify. We've gotten quite a few since we've started more aggressively asking for you guys to review. Based on our listener data, the most popular podcast platform that our listeners use is actually Apple Podcasts, and we currently don't really have a ton of reviews there. So if you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you enjoy the content we provide, stop right now, take a moment, send us a nice review. It really helps us spread the word about the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Also, check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. The chatter is starting to pick up again with draft season around the corner, and it's a nice community of hundreds of people that love talking fantasy hockey. Nate's also been running some best ball leagues in there, so if anyone has an itch to flex their drafting muscles in a low-risk environment, the Discord is where you'd find more information on that. So today, John and I are going to be talking about potential sleepers for this coming fantasy hockey season. Now, Nate's going to be writing an article about his sleepers and busts that'll be available to patrons only. It's one of the many perks that comes with being a patron of Apples and Genos, along with access to patron listener leagues, early access to Nate's fantasy projections, and more. So if that's something that interests you, go to patreon.com/applesgenos to sign up for as little as $5 a month. And if you are interested in the patron leagues, I would sign up as soon as possible because we're going to start filling those up in September. Nate's going to be getting those going very soon. So head on over to Patreon and sign up to be a patron.
Hey, so I was wondering before we move into talking about sleepers, is the Dynasty League that we are filling, is that patron only, or is that open to everybody in the Discord?
That is open to everyone in the Discord. So we potentially have a couple more spots open for a Dynasty startup. So if you're interested in that, John and I are in a league. I'm going to be commissioning it with the help of R33 in the Discord. So it's a Bangers Cats league. We're going to be doing a slow draft. It'll be a veteran draft and then a minors draft. So if you're interested in that, send me a DM in the Discord. It's just Josh in the Discord, and I'll get you set up.
Nice.
So do you want to talk some sleepers, Binksy?
Let's do it. You going to lead it off?
Let's do it. I will lead it off. So my first sleeper that I have here is Arturi Lehkonen. So Arturi Lehkonen, I think now is solidified in the top 6 in Colorado. I think they really like him there. He played pretty consistently on the second line after he was acquired from Montreal at the trade deadline. Not having Kadri 5-on-5 is going to hurt a little bit. He'll likely be playing with JT Comfort or Alex Newhook at center, but Nichushkin's still going to be there on the other wing. And I think those two are going to be the first men up if or when injuries come to Landeskog and Rantanen. It's almost kind of become a foregone conclusion that is going to happen at least for some time every year for those two. So it'll be either Lehkonen or Nichushkin that moves up to that top line, and that's going to be majorly valuable in terms of their fantasy value. Lehkonen spent a lot of time on PP1 net front during the season and in the playoffs when Kadri was hurt. And it sounds like they really like him and value him highly. So he would be my pick for a sleeper because if he plays on PP1, he could have a huge career year. I don't think he ever was given an opportunity in Montreal. He played up and down the lineup and especially more recently was really low in the lineup, and they never really gave him a chance on special teams. So I think if he plays on that PP1, I would watch the start of the year in training camp to see what they're doing with him. But I predict that he will probably be that Kadri replacement on PP1, and that if that's the case, he's going to have a massive year.
It's an excellent situation. He seems super viable, and the general praise that he's getting from the rest of the roster and from the management it's not like blowing smoke. Like, they are huge on him, and for them to be huge on him with such a talented roster is absolutely fantastic. The opportunity is clearly there. There's a little bit of rub between him and Nuke, but as a Stars fan, I don't have a whole lot of trust in Nuke being consistently that good. So of the two options, I think Lekin is your better bet for sure.
Yeah, his underlying numbers have always been really good too. It's just I don't think he's ever been given the opportunity, so that I'm feeling really good about him. Who is your first sleeper, Binksy?
So my first sleeper is Dylan Larkin. He's a center for Detroit, easily a top line player. His ADP in Fantrax right now is 80. With centers being so heavily stacked, I think it's important for you to either get one of those kind of top 5 players or be willing to stack a few of the same tier between, I think, 70 and 90. Once you get to about 100, the value kind of tapers off a little bit. In Detroit, they were bottom 5 team in Corsi for percentage. Last year, they've added power play 2 and second line prowess. They essentially added a second line in Perron and Kopp and Kubalik. So having better depth should alleviate the workload, which kind of seems to drag him down year to year. And I think emotionally drags him down towards the end of games where they're getting spanked a bit. The injury issues that have kept his ceiling around 70 games since 17 and 18 should be lightened a little bit. He's coming off a career high in shooting percentage with a relatively middle of the road shot total. Even on a massively underperforming bottom third expected goal for and power play expected goal for team, I think there's a huge area for improvement as a team, just in terms of actual goals and that keeping them motivated into the third period and late into the third period as the team themselves. I'm thinking as the team improves, so will its need to ice their best players. His near 20 minutes average time on ice should be steady even as the talent around him improves. I think those two factors will kind of come together and keep him at that 20-minute mark that really seems to bolster players' production level. At 80 ADP, most people will be overpaying for centers like Zegras and other sleeper list top tier player Tim Stützle. Kadri is probably going to jump right up in there now that he's got a solidified situation. You should be able to wait another round and maximize your return on investment with a player like Dylan Larkin.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think at the very least, he's going to see his power play opportunity improve. Not that he's going to get more power play ice time. I think just having David Perron on that other flank as a one-time threat is going to free up some space for Larkin to potentially be able to. The penalty kill won't be cheating as much on his side because he's been more of the shot threat on that power play. So having someone on the other side that's a legitimate threat is going to be huge for him. So I think that power play in general is going to get better. And I'm totally with you on Larkin. I don't think that. He had a great year last year, so I think he is on people's radar, but maybe not being valued as high as he should be. My next sleeper is Rickard Rakell. So currently his Fantrax ADP is 163.34. So he's going pretty late. And you know what? He's going to play with either Malkin or Crosby. So that's a pretty good situation 5-on-5 for him, no matter what. They've locked him up long-term. So they're investing on him being a part of the team for a long time. So that to me, I feel like opens the door for him potentially replacing Brian Rust on line one. If Rust shows some regression this year, which he reasonably could, and also could replace him on power play one. Like Rakell is a guy that's proven. He's scored 30 goals multiple times in the league. Just like everyone else on Pittsburgh, he struggled to stay healthy and play an 82 game season. But so he'll fit right in there. But I think there's a legitimate opportunity for him to play on PP1 and with Crosby and Gensel, because Gensel and Crosby I think are going to stick together no matter what. But if he doesn't play on line one, he's going to play with Malkin. So I think this is a pretty good situation for Raquel. And I mean, probably the best situation that he's been in since he was playing with Getzlaf and Perry when in their prime. So I really like Rickard Raquel, especially if you can get him that late in the draft. I think he's going to return some major value. With Pittsburgh last year, he had 13 points in 19 games with only a 54% IPP and an 8.33 shooting percentage, which is low for him, even though his shooting percentage kind of fluctuates year after year. So yeah, again, very dependent on deployment, but I think regardless, he's gonna return you a lot of value late in the draft.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you can probably tie the fluctuating shooting percentage to his line mates and the team success, and he's clearly in a much better situation. So plus if players are anything like me, and I think a lot of people are in regards to the Ducks, there's a stink that goes with Ducks players that aren't Troy Terry and Zegras. So a lot of people are going to see that and not necessarily tie that into the opportunity and the ceiling and the floor that he's got playing in Pittsburgh.
Who's your next sleeper, Binksy?
Sleeper number 2 for me is a big name coming into this year. I'm going to assume that there's going to be a lot of sleeper lists with him sitting on it, but I really, really believe in the caliber of player that he is. I waited on him to have this success last year, and the opportunity is much wider for him this year. It's Carter Verhaeghe, playing in Florida at left wing, ADP of 169, so an incredibly reasonable cost. He's not facing the time on ice challenge at left wing from Duclair this year. It's just not going to happen with the injury for him. Huberdeau is gone as well. So we're looking at a top line player on an incredibly successful offensive team. I'm expecting a big jump from the 16 minutes average time on ice. It wouldn't shock me to see that jump to 18 and 19, especially considering what is usually kept him down is fluctuation on top line minutes and not really getting a ton of burn on the power play. So he's either going to be running alongside a monster PP1 or setting point for a PP2. Either way, the opportunity is really strong for a player who hit 55 points while only collecting 3 power play points total. All of them were assists, netting 0 power play goals. So even if there is a small uptick, you're looking at a 65 to 75 point player, depending on the variation and success there on the power play. Like, there's just so much opportunity for him, and he absolutely has the talent level to succeed given that opportunity. What I thought was interesting in his stat lines thus far, his total shots attempted has doubled every year since he's come into the league. So if he can come close to replicating this pattern alongside Barkov and Tkachuk, there's a lot of gold to be dug up at 169 overall.
Yeah, I love this pick. I'm actually surprised that he's being drafted that low. I think he is pretty much guaranteed to be the left wing on that top line. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but the offensive depth on Florida has definitely decreased since last year. They've lost a few guys. They lost Mason Marchment. They lost Huberdeau. I mean, I know they got Tkachuk in return, but and Anthony Duclair is going to be hurt for a good chunk of the year. So I think Verhaeghe is pretty much that top line left winger, and I think if he's playing with Barkov and Tkachuk, that on its own is going to be significant. Not to mention with less depth on forward, I think they're probably going to be playing their top 2 lines a little bit more 5-on-5. So that uptick in ice time 5-on-5 will be hugely beneficial for Verhaeghe. So I love that pick. I totally with you there, especially at 169. That's crazy. That's even lower than Raquel.
It's really wild. There's just so much opportunity for him, and I'm attributing that to the fact that people have seen that opportunity and that talent level for him previously, and it not really panned out for them, even at 55 points last year. So I'm hopeful it steadies at that same level, and I'm sniping him.
So I'm gonna go with, for my next sleeper, Cole Sillinger from Columbus. So He was out of players on Columbus last year that played the entire year. He actually had the best individual scoring chances for per 60 on the team, and he was among the top on the team in shots per 60 and individual shot attempts per 60. And that's as an 18-year-old. This is a guy that they did not expect to make the team coming out of camp. And he played really well in a situation where there was no offensive depth at all. He was not really playing with consistent line mates, and he figured it out. Boone Jenner had a fantastic year last year. When he played, he was injured for a good chunk of it, but had his best offensive year. So I think Jenner is probably going to get an opportunity with Gaudreau and Line on the top line. But I think the team, the front office, and the coaching staff think very highly of Sillinger. And I think it's more than likely that at some point he moves into that spot, whether it's due to injury to Jenner or if Jenner just isn't really working out. Jenner's just not really, I mean, on a competitive team, you don't want Boone Jenner as your top line center. Yeah. So if Sillinger develops into that player, I think they're much happier putting him between Gaudreau and Line and out of the centers that they have currently. I mean, unless you're including Kent Johnson in that conversation, I mean, it's still pretty early for him. I think Sillinger is natural. Early. I think it's natural to put Cole Sillinger in that top line position, and then he's got an extra year of development now. He only played just over 13 minutes per game last year, so I think there could be a significant bump there if he's on the top line. So I'm really looking carefully at Cole Sillinger. I don't even know what his ADP is, but I imagine it's even lower than the guys that we've already mentioned.
So something that I thought was interesting when I was kind of trying to rifle through reasoning for him having such good success at 18 years old, right? Is that he's actually a hometown kid. He's from Columbus, which I think is a huge factor when you're talking about someone trying to be a top level player in the NHL. One of those roadblocks is having some consistency around you, having family around you, having situations in place that allow you to feel more cemented in where you're at, right? And he's not having to come from across the pond. He's not having to move to a major metro. Like, he's a small town kid living in a small town, being a star in that small town. And, for whatever it's worth, that's a big part of branding for a small town team, for them to have brought in a big star and then slot him next to a person that is literally part of the community, I think says quite a bit. I think there's obvious issues with Boone Jenner coming back and being a mainstay in the lineup. Like, you just don't ever shake back injuries, especially as a center in the NHL. So it wouldn't shock me to see them defer to him really early in camp because, he's Boone Jenner and he's earned it. And he's, to our knowledge, going to be healthy to begin the year. But when you have such talent on the wings, you probably want to get that top line gelled from the get-go. And I think Sillinger has a huge, huge, huge chance to absolutely just break out of the gates running with those two players.
Totally. And by the way, his ADP is 230 in Fantrax right now. So probably not even getting drafted in a lot of leagues. So he's an interesting option. Definitely a guy, I don't know if I'd go out and draft him right away, but I'd put him on my watch list, and I'd be looking at that deployment. And you know what, maybe if in training camp he's put on the top line, I'd try and pick him up.
That's huge upside at a fully stacked center position. So
yeah, absolutely. Who you got next, Binksy?
Sleeper number 3 for me is another center up and coming. This one just moved teams. Dylan Strome, working for Washington in this coming season. ADP of 239, so a massive value here. I considered a lot of value names in this echelon. JT Compher crossed my mind. Argued for and against teammates Anthony Mantha and Connor Brown. Really trying to find a great value at right wing in this level of the draft, so you're not having to burn any extra capital, pardon the pun, to do so. Strome seems to have the best situation to break out, right? Dual eligibility between center and right wing is going to get you those right wing minutes, but not necessarily as a right winger, which is what I'm hoping to do in a bunch of different places. He's going to be sitting net front on power play 1 and collecting second line center minutes with Oshie and Mantha. I think that's an excellent value in terms of a second line center, such a late portion of the draft. And having that right wing eligible is a huge uptick in value for me. The rate of scoring chances should really rebound for the Capitals this year, especially on the power play. Even with Backstrom being down and Tom Wilson being down, the actual offensive output, I just don't see a way that it doesn't rebound for them. They have the talent. The team is very much the same. They're a playoff caliber team that just didn't seem to have the good breaks. And if that comes back to the top third of the league rather than the bottom third, I think you're looking at a lot of scoring generation just across the team. And of note, and I'm a big believer in this, I think money is a huge motivator. He is a former top prospect sitting on a contract year, and it has a real tinge of Kadri to it to me, like a quality offensive team, second line center, playing the front of the net on the power play and just going for the bag, you know? It wouldn't shock me at all to see him replicate those stretches from last year for the Blackhawks where he was just kind of on fire and doing everything right. So
yeah, I think he definitely showed flashes last year. Also, I mean, worth noting, he played with the Brinket and Kane, so that's, I mean, I think it'd be pretty easy to perform in that situation. But I do think you're onto something here. I don't know that he'd be generating things by himself. I think it's entirely dependent on his deployment, how he succeeds. I think Oshie and Mantha, that's not a bad situation. Both of those guys are also guys that can never stay healthy. So that's a situation where if both those guys get injured, there's not a heck of a lot else to, or a lot more for, unless they start putting him up on right wing with Kuznetsov and Ovechkin. But I think that's a situation where I don't know.
I think that that possibility is another one that rings true for me. I don't know that it's entirely Dylan Strome that I love more than it is the right wing option for the Capitals,
Sure.
being somewhere between Strome and Connor Brown and Mantha.
Yep.
Whoever that shakes out to be, I think has a massive opportunity here.
Yeah, and I mean, Tom Wilson's hurt to start the year, so any three of those guys, I imagine it'll be Brown or Mantha, could be playing on the top line, at least for a good chunk of the year. So, yeah. Let's move on to, I guess it's my last one. So this is my last sleeper. It's Oliver Bjorkstrand. So he's going at about 130 ADP in Fantrax. I personally think, even though he's going to Seattle, I think his offensive situation in terms of players that he's going to be playing with is actually getting better. I know that was the place where offense goes to die last year, but I mean, Columbus wasn't a whole lot better. They've greatly improved now with Gaudreau, but I still think that Bjorkstrand is in a better situation. Not to mention he's the clear-cut number one right winger on the team. I think they're going to play the shit out of him because he's really good at generating offense, and that's something that they didn't really have anyone that could do that last year. So he's going to play PP1. He's played the penalty kill in the past. I think his ice time is going to skyrocket. He's going to have the most ice time of his career. And even though he went through stretches last year, he went through a stretch in the middle of the year where he wasn't really doing anything. But then at the beginning and the end of the year, he was almost point per game. So I feel like there is potential here for him to be a 30 goal scorer. He had 28 last year, and potentially 65, 70 points. So if you're getting him that low at 130, that's pretty good value, especially because he plays right wing. So, and that's again a position that of scarcity. So, I like Bjorkstrand. He's probably going to be playing with Matty Beniers. Matty Beniers is a really highly touted prospect. A lot of people are predicting that he's going to win the Calder this year. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but I think that if Beniers hits, then I think Bjorkstrand is going to hit as well. So I'm really high on Bjorkstrand this year. And again, I think he's being disrespected because he's in Seattle, but I truly think his situation is better.
The Seattle part, I am absolutely on board with completely trashing, right? I think you're absolutely right. I think that's where offense goes to die. With that said, if you're going to spend a draft pick on a Seattle player, I think a right wing is probably where you want to do it. And OBJ is probably the player that you want to do it on. I think you're absolutely right. I think the cost to acquire is almost nothing with a player of this time on ice burn, right? Like you're going to get, he's going to get every opportunity to be successful, even on the PK. Like he's just going to be on the ice constantly. And as a shot generator, they're going to defer to him when Beniers is not dancing around people. So I like it.
Who you got last, Binksy?
So if you listen to our podcast, you're probably going to see this one coming, but I am a just huge fan of this player. And I see the ability and the time on ice to just jump in the wake of Fiala moving. So my sleeper number 4 is Matthew Boldy, playing for the Minnesota Wild. His ADP is 137. I feel like it's probably going to drop a bit as other players in that same echelon, as their situations kind of shake out, as name brands and injuries come to light, and et cetera. I think he's probably going to dip a little bit. I think we can really expect Minnesota to try more than a few different line combinations involving Boldy in a highly offensive position. Their centers, kind of from the top to bottom, are a wash, right? Like it could be any one of their centers on any one of the lines. I think the second line offense is going to be Boldy no matter what happens. So regardless of how the lines shake out, his 15 minutes on ice should rise. What really, really intrigues me about Boldy as a big sleeper value here is that Boldy and Rossi have excellent chemistry thus far through the rungs. I'm expecting them to go on a tear together once Rossi solidifies himself in the lineup. It wouldn't shock me to see Eriksson Ek be a third-line center for the rest of his tenure with them, for them to stick with Hartman because of the success that that top-scoring line has put together. And if Boldy finds his way on to the top power play, it's a massively successful power play. I don't really see it happening, but I do see him spearheading the second power play line. If something happens to the tiny Kaprizov, he's a first line player on a team that gears all of their offense to that position. So you never bank on that, but it's certainly something that I'm considering as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting pick for sure. I think, Marco Rossi obviously is going to play this year. So, and I honestly never really thought about the fact that they had played together in the minors. So they
well
probably have some good chemistry there. So that's an excellent point. I think that should be noted for sure. And he's definitely an upgrade over Freddie Gaudreau at center, which is who Boldy and Fiala were playing with last year. I think Fiala not being on the other wing is going to hurt, but I think Boldy still is a great player. So I'm with you there. Like, especially at an ADP that's that low, if you can get him that late in the draft, I think there's a value pick there, and there's opportunity in Minnesota just because there's not really a ton of offensive depth there for him to potentially play on PP1 at some point. So I think that is a pretty good bet. I like him as a sleeper.
I think I am one of the people out there that are more confident in Boldy being a bigger part of the success of Fiala and rather the other way around, right? Like,
Interesting.
I'm certainly not willing to put Fiala on a bust list. I don't think he's, just having ridden coattails. I think that's obviously not true. But I am more in line with Boldy being a larger portion of the success of that tandem than most people.
It's an interesting point. Fiala did play a lot better when Boldy was there than when he wasn't. So
right, they called it second half Fiala, but it could have been Boldy Fiala.
Could be. Well, that's all we have for today. Check out the Apples and Ginos Discord server. Shout out to the band there for providing our music. Their Spotify link is in the episode description. Give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts once again. Follow us on Twitter. Binksy's at Binklemania. Nate is at Apples Ginos. I'm at JustJoshin41. Stay safe and get hyped. Draft season's around the corner. Have a good one, folks.
Good night, world.
All right, man. There's one. That was a nice quick one.
Yeah, we got through it, right? I'm wearing my